Welcome back to European Footballer Adda. It's been some time since we have been online, and that's majorly because of professional commitments that we have had. In between, we have had the round three of the FIFA World Cup getting completed. 16 teams were eliminated, 32 teams qualified. So there were 72 matches that were held. Out of those 48 teams, like I said, 16 were eliminated. After that, there was a round of 32, and half of those teams went home. And we have now around 16 teams standing still. So today we kind of do a wrap up of these two rounds together. And some of the things that we'll talk about are those 72 group stage matches, as well as the 16 round of 32 matches, the 13 different kickoff times, one very, very, very long month so far. And the first 48 team World Cup group stage is now in the books, and almost all of it went exactly the way the seedings said it would, which is in itself a story. But then when you talk about 32 teams walking out into this knockout round and 16 walking out, there were a lot of big casualty names in that list. Germany gone, Netherlands gone, both of them on the same night. An entire continent's worth of Asian football has been wiped clean off the bracket. There's not a single AFC side that is left standing. So today we ask some honest question. Did making the World Cup bigger actually make it better? Did the way the teams were allocated across the continents, did that make sense? Did we just bolt more games into a stage that already struggled to matter? Did any of the rule changes actually helped elevate the matches for more consequence? Or did this round of 32 actually make sense? And what about the results of the round of 16? Are they going to be similar to the round of 32 of previous World Cups? Welcome back to European Footballer Adda. If you're new here, this is where we go past the highlight reel and ask the important underlying questions that actually matter. Why did it happen? Today, we look at the way the group stages finished and also a full breakdown of the World Cup 2026 round of 32. We will cover the giants who fail, the confederation story nobody predicted, the sheer weight of penalty drama, and the hosts making history. And then I'll tell you how the big shots have fared so far. Quick favor before we start. If this kind of a content is up your alley, then hit subscribe to the channel, ring that bell icon, and we are doing this after every knockout rounds from here on onwards. So stay tuned for that. Well, for 2 years, we were told that 48 teams would dilute the quality, that we would sift through mismatch after mismatch, where big nations will be putting five past sides that had no business being here. But that didn't really happen. The expansion's effect on the spectacle was limited. That's a compliment to the newcomers. Some of the newcomers were definitely not passengers. They were organized, they were disciplined, and a lot of them were genuinely good to watch. Cabo Verde, or Cape Verde, as you might want to call it, a nation of around 500,000 people, and only two nations have ever participated with a lower population mark, Iceland and Curaçao in this 2026 World Cup, drew their way out of the group without losing a match and became the smallest country in history to reach the knockout rounds. These were not embarrassments, they were stories. And there's a structural reason we under discuss, and that is the diaspora. The modern minnow doesn't only pick from players on a particular city or a particular island. Cabo Verde leaned heavily on the Cabo Verdeans who were raised in Portugal, the Netherlands, and France. In the decisive qualifiers, more than half the squad were diaspora players born and raised in Europe. Curaçao effectively was a Dutch development project. Almost the entire squad came through Netherlands, with only one player actually born on that island. So the talent gap between a big nation and a small one is far narrower than the population figures suggest. These federations are fishing in the same European academy pool as everyone else. So if your fear was that the expansion meant bad football, then relax. The level was fine. Several debutants genuinely looked the part. So competence is not the problem, but the problem lay somewhere else. The problem is, what did everyone do when everyone is solid and nearly everyone is going through? Then what exactly is the group stage for? What exactly was the group stage deciding? And we have a definite jeopardy problem in here. That is the heart of it. And I'm afraid, I've been a critic of this for long, and I think this has been proven right. If you run the numbers, out of the 48 teams, 72 group matches, and the end of it all, 16 went home and 32 went through. And we played like 2.5 weeks of football to eliminate those 16. How many teams of genuine consequence were eliminated? You can say that the biggest casualty was Uruguay, who were undone by a late Muslera error against Spain. Well, Uruguay should have changed Muslera long back. They were the highest ranked side to fall. You can also probably point your finger at Turkey, who is a fashionable dark horse built around Arda Güler and Kenan Yildiz, and they had a nightmare. But then there are other stories around that also. Turkey was in Group D, which was technically a group of death. All four teams were equally matched. So Turkey missing out on that group was not really a huge shock in that sense. And then we will also talk about one of the rule changes, which effectively meant that they could not come back after two losses. Saudi Arabia also went out, but beyond Uruguay and Turkey, the seeds overwhelmingly strolled through. Brazil, France, Spain, Argentina, England, Portugal, Germany, none of them were ever in real danger. Even the one which was in real danger, Belgium, even they managed just one win convincingly and they went through. We ran an entire group stage and barely removed anyone you would actually miss later on. That is the price of taking 32 qualifiers from 48. When two-thirds of the field advances and 8 of the 12 third place teams also sneak through, you drain jeopardy out of the group. A group stage defeat stops being a catastrophe and becomes an inconvenience. The whole point of that old format, that one bad week sends a giant home, ask Germany in 2018 or 2022, that is mostly gone. And FIFA then managed to make it worse with a rule change almost nobody asked for. And here we are revisiting that Turkey decision. For 2026, the first tiebreaker is no longer a goal difference. It's head to head. On paper, that sounds reasonable, but in practice, it manufactured dead rubbers. Under head to head, a team can lock its position before the final round even kicks off. There's no goal difference swing left to chase. So two nations, Haiti and Turkey, were mathematically out after only two matches because they lost those two matches. They couldn't have scored a million goals in the third and still go through. Several others had qualified with a game to spare and nothing left to play for. If you had won those first two matches, you were through. So the final round of group games, which is traditionally the most thrilling day of any World Cup, and all those simultaneous kickoffs, the drama swinging from group to group, who is going to score that final piece of goal, that only happened probably in one match where Austria and Algeria traded 3 goals each, which was also a dicey match, just to say that. There were exceptions, but as a whole, the last match day was a letdown, and the format did that effectively. Now, Let me push back a bit on this because international football is fun and it is almost a tradition to predict disaster before every major tournament. I'm not here to tell you that this World Cup is ruined, but there is a real question underneath all of this. And it isn't really a football question, it's more a values question. What do we want this tournament to be? Should it be the best of the best, tight, brutal, every match matters? Or more the merrier, a sprawling, inclusive, woke festival where 48 nations get their moment on the biggest stage? I mean, both could be legitimate options. You can have a pick of whichever you want, and one of them only will have tension, will have the drama, and will have the thrill. The other one will probably only have spectacle. So 48 teams with this knockout structure feels like an unhappy compromise between these two. Big enough to dilute the jeopardy, not bold enough to commit to a format that would restore it. We have landed exactly in an awkward middle, and I would rather say a muddle situation. To add to it, FIFA also screwed up a lot about the with the kickoff timings and the rhythm of the viewers. So how a tournament feels depends enormously on whether you can actually build it into your life. I still remember back in the 86 World Cup, which was the first World Cup that I saw, or the 90 World Cup, which was the first World Cup that I actually followed game by game, or the 94 World Cup. I would know which match would happen exactly when and how to, catch all of those matches live on my telly. This time, the tournament is spread across United States, Canada, and Mexico. That's maybe 4 or 5 time zones. So if you're watching like me from South Asia, from the Gulf, or from East Asia, some of these matches will always land at brutal hours. Maybe 3, 4, 5, 6:30 in the morning. That's geography. You cannot move North America closer to Kolkata. And I won't pretend FIFA could have. But the criticism is not about that. There is an inconsistency, not just the lateness. The group stage ran on something like 13 different kickoff times. Now, please bear that in mind. There were 13 different kickoff times in a matter of 2, 3 weeks. There was no anchor slot, no rhythm that we could rely on. In a normal World Cup, you learn the shape of the day fast. So you know when to sleep, when to wake up, how much time you want to spend for these matches, the early game, the tea time game, the prime time game. You plan your entire day or your sleep cycle around it. This time, the schedule was all over the place. And partly because the games were pushed later at the venues to protect players from extreme afternoon heat. But the knock on effect was that the viewing experience had no backbone. For an international audience, that matters a lot more. For example, if I know the big game is always at, say, half past midnight my time, I can commit to it. I can work my other professional and personal life cycle around it. That is what I have been doing all these years in all the World Cups that I have seen. If it's a different hour every day, like this time, for the first time in my life, then I drift. I will only probably catch the highlights. I will half follow. And eventually, I'll stop building my evenings around it. A recent survey of the European fans actually said exactly that. A large majority reckoned the Times would cut how many games they would watch live. And for those of us across Asia, I suspect it is worse. You are asked just not to stay up late, but to relearn the timetable every single day. Someday it will be 9:30 it starts, someday it will be 10:30, someday it will be 11:30, someday it will be 12:30, and then it will start at 1:30. FIFA cannot fix the time zones, but they could have at least given us a more consistent and predictable rhythm, and they did not. That is what made this World Cup slightly less I would say a lot less enjoyable, at least for me. Now let us look at the round of 32, some of those results. Let's start with the two results that actually broke the internet. Germany 1-1 with Paraguay and out 4-3 on the penalties. Netherlands 1-1 with Morocco, out 3-2 on penalties. Two of European football's aristocrats were both dumped from 12 yards. And here's the thing, neither was a smash and grab. Look at how Paraguay set up against Germany. Paraguay didn't park the bus. They parked a mid-block. They let Germany have the ball in front of them, cut off the middle, and dared them to play through a packed central third. Julio Enciso's goal on 42 minutes came from exactly that plan. They won it, they had a break, and punished Germany. Kai Havertz leveled that, and Germany huffed and puffed, but they never solved that puzzle. And once you are in a shootout, all that possession counts for nothing. But even then, it is strange because there was the saying that death, tax, and Germany in a tiebreaker always wins. And here was the Germany team in a tiebreaker, fluffing shots to Paraguay of all teams. It was not expected. The German teams which did not qualify out of the group stages of 2018 and 2022 ranks probably a little bit lower than this team because they at least qualified from the group. But if you think about it, all those three teams failed to at least make their round of 16. Qualifying from the group stages of 2018 and 2022 would have taken Germany to round of 16. Here they went out on round of 32. And even before that, they lost that match to Ecuador, the third match of that group, because there was nothing left to play for them. They had already qualified as the toppers of that group. That actually harmed Germany a lot. Coming to the Dutch, they were up against the African champions. They were up against a team who had actually beaten them on penalties in the last World Cup. So this was a chance to settle that score. Morocco is not a plucky underdog anymore. This is a top tier side with a World Cup semi-final on their CV. They matched the Netherlands man for man. They took it to extra time and held their nerve in the shootout. So this was not a surprise. I expected the Dutch to actually, face a stiff challenge. It was a 50-50 match, and they just couldn't improve on their 2022 showing. So good luck to Morocco, the way that they played. Now, let us go back to that FIFA allocation of 48 teams and how that has happened across the 6 confederations. If I look at the round of 32, we have a very skewed kind of a picture. Asia sent 9 teams to this World Cup. 9. Japan, South Korea, Iran, Australia, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Iraq, Jordan, and Uzbekistan. How many did they survive after round of 16? Into the round of 16? 0. Total wipeout. Japan pushed Brazil to a stoppage time winner. Australia took Egypt to penalties, but close doesn't get you a locker in the last 16. Qatar is the reigning 2-time AFC champions, but they're getting flogged by Canada 6-1 in a World Cup. That's not nice for Asian Federation. Out of those 9 teams that actually qualified, South Korea, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Iraq, Jordan, and Uzbekistan. That's 7 did not even qualify out of their groups. So out of the 12 groups, 7 teams that did not qualify. So 16 teams, out of the 16 teams that did not qualify, 7 were from Asia. Let's look at Africa. They sent 10, their biggest ever contingent. How many have survived into the round of 16? Exactly two. Morocco and Egypt. And both needed penalties to get there. Senegal, Ivory Coast, Algeria, Ghana, Cape Verde, Tunisia, South Africa, DR Congo, all are gone. Of course, Senegal, Ivory Coast, um, Cape Verde, especially, and South Africa as well as DR Congo gave a great account of themselves um, in the round of 32. So this expansion got more African nations to the dance, but the deep runs are still concentrated in the same one or two teams. So now, what's actually left? Europe has 7, South America has 4, and there are 3 hosts from the CONCACAF region, and then there's Africa's 2. So when I say only 7 out of those European teams, bear it in mind that there were several European teams which knocked each other out. So out of those 7, 3 teams knocked 3 other European teams out. The justifiable question then to ask is, should Asia actually have had 9 teams and Africa have had 10 teams in this World Cup at all? When barely 8 Asian teams have crossed the group stages or got to the round of 16 as it is called now, across the 8 World Cups since 1998, when actually for the first time that 32-team World Cup came into being. So 8 out of a possible 128 teams in the round of 16 since 1998 to 2026 has been Asia. Yet, in a 48-team World Cup, AFC has 9 entries. Correspondingly, Africa has had 10 possible teams amongst the 128 teams that have qualified for the round of 16 across World Cups from 1998 to 2026. Yet, in this 48-team tournament, they have 10 entries. Obviously, out of those 128, majority has been from Europe. 66 out of those 128 teams are or were Europeans. But only 16 out of this current 48-team lot are Europeans. I'm not giving a Eurocentric approach, but participation in a World Cup cannot be determined by which continent has how many nations, or which country has how much money to invest, or even what population will watch those games. The parameter for a continental qualification number should be borne out by overall quality of that continent. Something that was very aptly pointed out by Italian World Cup winner Rino Gattuso very recently. FIFA genuinely needs to ask the question if it is worth giving 19 slots to Asia and Africa if still only 2 of them are able to qualify into the round of 16 in a 48-team World Cup. Having said that, the round of 32 was a very enjoyable one. And there were a lot of comebacks, which was one of the key features of this round. If one match defined the spirit of this round, it was Belgium versus Senegal. Up to the 86th minutes in the clock, Belgium were down 2-0. And of course, Belgium had been piss poor in the group stages. In the first 2 group games, they played such turgid football that you would expect that they would have gone home for sure. Here, till 86 minutes, Senegal looked royalty. They had 2 goals. The second goal was really out of the box. Something that you would love to see in the highlights time and time again. And they were cruising into a round of 16 entry. And then on the 86th minute, Romelu Lukaku scores his 92nd goal for Belgium. And then on the 89th, Yuri Tielemans scores through a header. 2-2. It goes to the extra time. And in the 125th minute of extra time, the latest goal ever scored in a World Cup history, Tielemans buries a VAR penalty to win it 3-2. So, Belgium thus became only the second team in the last 11 World Cups to come back from 2 goals down in a knockout match and go through. Do you know who is the other team to ever do it? Back in 2018, Belgium did that against Japan. So they are, you can say, comeback artists or, escape artists. Um, but Belgium were not alone. Brazil were also staring a shock of their own. They were 1-0 down to Japan. There was a stunner from Keishu Sano from distance. And in the second half, with tinkering from Don Paulo, the manager, Casemiro leveled, and then Gabriel Martinelli won it in the 5th minute of stoppage time. Japan, heartbreakingly, have now lost after leading in the knockout rounds at 3 straight World Cups. Croatia in 2018, Belgium 2022, and now Brazil. And then there's the story of Cabo Verde. They actually didn't complete that comeback, but twice they hauled themselves level with the world champion Argentina before losing it in a same side goal in the 115th. There was also that match between Portugal and Croatia, where Portugal had to claw back in a very controversial manner, scoring 1 goal via a penalty, and the other goal in the 80, of course, after the 80th minute. And Croatia played stirringly and should have probably equalized in the extra time. And there was 18 minutes of extra time, and it finally finished 2-1. There were other notable comebacks like England, who had to dig deep to beat DR Congo. There was also jeopardy in terms of how Canada had to overcome South Africa with one of the last minute 88 or 89th minute goals. So overall, I would say the round of 32 delivered in terms of thrill as well as in terms of drama. Do you know how many of this round of 32 matches actually finished nil-nil? While 2 of them went to penalties, actually 3 of them went to penalties and one other finished in the extra time. There were 0 matches which actually had a nil-nil. Every single knockout game produced goal. In a round that's meant to be cagey and fear-driven, nobody parked the bus. Now, someone in the comments is already probably typing, but there have been 7 goalless draws this tournament. That's tied for the most ever. And you'll be right on the raw numbers. 7 nil-nils, level with 2022, 2014, and all the way back to 1982. But those 7 nil-nils in those tournaments actually came from 64 matches. This one has 104. So actually 7 goalless draws out of 104 is the lowest rate of goalless games in modern World Cup history. Barely 1 in 15. Stretch the field and the nil-nils simply do not keep pace. The football has been relentlessly, gloriously attacking. And the numbers back it up everywhere. This is on course to be the highest scoring World Cup ever staged. And there has been a huge amount of, I would say, rule changes which has enabled it. Plus, the managers too have ensured that they have played in a positive vein. Even a team like Cabo Verde didn't just sit back and scored 2 stunner of goals against world champion Argentina. Canada put 6 past Qatar. Sweden and the Netherlands traded 5-goal hauls. Portugal also a 5-0. Just one venue, Guadalajara, has now hosted 19 World Cup games without a single goalless draw. That is a brand new record. Part of that is that some of the matches have been, where teams have been blown out. Part of it is the heat and the hydration breaks fracturing the defensive shape. This is a very important piece. Having that mm, mandatory break midway through each half is actually doing more harm to the defensive ability, and also is actually giving the coaches to come in and sharpen some of their attacking acumen during that phase. So that is also, I feel, one of the important pieces which has made a difference. Part of it is also, of course, that generation has simply decided that attack is the plan. The safety first World Cup is dead, at least till this stage. We will see how it goes in the next set of knockout rounds. But till this phase, um, we can say that there has been 16 games, 16 sets of goals, and tournament does not do goalless. But then again, there is a glorious exception. And in this tournament of goals, that name is Unai Simon. While the rest of the world is throwing punches, Spain's goalkeeper has quietly built a wall. In an edition drowning in goals, he has not conceded a single one, not one across 4 matches. And against Austria in the round of 32, he made history, where he stayed 519 consecutive minutes without conceding at a World Cup. That breaks a record that had stood for 36 years. Tell is Walter Zenga. He had been unbeaten for 517 minutes at Italia 90. Simon's run actually stretches back to Qatar, if you ask me. The closing minutes against Japan, the whole Morocco tie, including the extra time, and he's carried it clean through this entire tournament. He is now the most unbeatable goalkeeper the World Cup has ever seen. So there's a contrast, and it's a pretty beautiful one. The highest scoring World Cup ever staged also contains the greatest shutout streak in the tournament's history. Let's look at rapid fire report cards on the big dogs who have advanced to the next round. France, I will say A plus. 3-0 over Sweden. Mbappe deeper into the record books, and honestly, the most complete team in the tournament. But it's not about Mbappe, it's also about Olise. How many times do you see a player has 5 assists in just 4 games? That's what um, Olise is giving to this team, to this French team. And if Mbappe has 6 goals, then Dembele too has 4. So Dembele and Mbappe and Olise together, it's just a cheat code. Next up, Argentina. I would say B minus. They did win versus Cape Verde, but they were exposed. If you press them high and refuse to sit off and have a good team cohesive structure, then they can be rattled. Egypt would have taken notes from that match, and I believe that there could be more such tight examinations of this Argentina team going forward, unless the referees play similar role like they did in 2022. Brazil, I would say they would have been graded B minus 2, but because they had to come back from 1 goal down and won it in the 90th minute itself, I would put them as grade B. So they needed a stoppage time Martinelli winner to avoid the scare of losing. They were efficient, not yet emphatic, but Don Carlo has managed to give this Brazil that X factor. And they could actually make a surprise run at least to the semifinals. Spain, I will say also grade will be A. 3-0 over Austria, Lamine Yamal pulling strings. Their first knockout win since the 2010 final. That stat alone tells you how long Spain have waited to feel like Spain again. But Unai Simon has been virtually unpassable inside the goal. So, yeah. England will get a C plus. The 2-1 past DR Congo was job well done, but they were absolutely uninspiring. They struggled to top that group. They struggled to beat a very poor Ghana, and now they go up to the Azteca, and there are some reports that they may switch to some performance enhancing medication to conquer the height at and the pressure in that stadium. Portugal, well, again, I will put it at C. Their 2-1 win over Croatia was 2016 final rematch. Um, they depended a lot on the refereeing decisions to fall in their favor. They were absolutely piss poor in the group matches. They should have topped that group. They didn't. Um, and so far, I think they have performed much better, at least in that round of 32, once Ronaldo was taken off and Gonzalo Ramos came on. They won it without Ronaldo being that hero. And in a week that they're honoring Diego Jota, it would be interesting to see how they um, face up to Spain. They're learning to function around Ronaldo rather than through Ronaldo, which is a positive thing. But with that kind of firepower in the wings and in the midfield, Portugal should be doing better. So, a round of 32 that gave us fallen giants, continental wipeout, shootout heartbreaks, and also the comeback of the tournament. The goal rush that will not quit, and a round of 16 which looks stacked. The expansion was supposed to dilute the drama, instead, it turned the volume up. Tell me in the comments, is FIFA right to allocate 19 slots to Asia and Africa, giving only 16 to Europe? And was Belgium the greatest comeback you have ever seen at a national team championship in World Cup? I read every one of those comments. If you got something out of this, smash that like and subscribe for the future episodes. And I'll see you in the round of 16. This has been the Tactics Room. Take care.